Yes, good morning and welcome to Citizen Extra, the Wednesday edition with me, Fred Indimuli. Now, 14 candidates for the August elections are this morning appearing before the IEBC's Enforcement Committee over cases of alleged breach of the Electoral Code of Conduct. Hearings will be conducted starting 10 a.m. this morning at the Commission's offices, 6th floor Anniversary Towers here in Nairobi. Some of the notable names on the list of those summoned include Bungoma Governor Ken Lusaka and Kibwezi East MP Jessica Mbalu. A tough-sounding statement by IEBC Chair Wafula Chebukati warns that the Code of Conduct Enforcement Committee will continue to monitor the conduct of campaigns across the country and will not hesitate to take appropriate action against anyone found culpable. Are you convinced that something will actually be done? Is this just another classic case of window dressing? Shouldn't the list have been longer? Is there precedence where the electoral agency has barred a candidate for breach of the Code of Conduct? That will be our main discussion this morning. Meanwhile, both NASA and Jubilee continue on the campaign trail today, with President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy expected to tour Murang'a County, while the NASA brigade heads to Naivasha and Kuresoi. Now, the assertion yesterday by NASA candidate Raila Odinga that the military is being used to interfere with the elections has created a new battlefront between these two sides. For a campaign cycle that seems to be struggling to come up with a galvanizing question that can last longer than 2 newspaper headlines, we'll be watching to see just how long this latest exchange will last. Away from politics and election matters, Nairobi is once again staring at a looming health crisis after doctors downed their tools over salary arrears. With nurses already on the 3rd week of their nationwide strike, patients at public health facilities now have nowhere to turn. We'll be following developments on this front as well. Elsewhere, the National Crime Research Center under the Office of the Attorney General is this morning launching a research report titled Emerging Crimes, the Case of Kidnappings in Kenya. That event is currently underway at the KICC, and our reporters are on standby to break down for us. Also happening this morning, Kenya Wildlife Service is giving a report on findings of aerial total count of elephants, buffaloes and giraffes in the Tsavo Mkomazi ecosystem. That count was carried out in February this year. In studio this morning, we're privileged to have Brian Weke, a political strategist, also a governance expert. Also in studio, we have nominated MP Isaac Mwaura and political analyst Mark Bichachi. They'll be helping us delve into the matters I've just mentioned. Also happening this morning, in as far as the health crisis is concerned, we'll be linking up with our reporter John Wanyama all the way from Eldoret. Remember, this is the 16th day of the nurses' strike. In Nairobi, the situation is even worse, as I mentioned earlier, with the doctors downing their tools on a separate protest. Meanwhile, in the corridors of justice, the High Court this morning, making a ruling on a case seeking to block Wavinya Ndeti from being the Wiper Democratic Movement's gubernatorial candidate for Machakos County in the August 8th election. That ruling is currently going on at the Milimani Law Courts. Let's listen in as we expect this ruling by Justice George Odunga.
To any of them, and may from time to time adjourn the hearing of the suit. Under this rule, the granting of an adjournment to the party to a suit is thus left to the discretion of the court, and the discretion is not subject to any definite rules, but should be exercised in a judicial and reasonable manner and upon proper material. It should be exercised after considering the party's conduct in the case, the opportunity he had of getting ready, and the truth and sufficiency of the reason alleged by him for not being ready. It should be exercised in favor of the party applying for adjournment only if sufficient cause is shown. Sufficient cause refers to the acts or omissions of the applicant for adjournment. What is sufficient cause depends upon the circumstances of each case, and generally speaking, where the necessity for the adjournment is not due to anything for which the party applying for it is responsible, or where there has been little or no negligence, an adjournment would not normally be refused. But where the party has been wanting in due diligence or is guilty of negligence, an adjournment may be refused. Under the corresponding rule of the Indian Code of Civil Procedure by Manohar and Ndeti, circumstances which have been held to constitute sufficient cause for adjournment where a party is not ready for hearing by reason of its having been taken by surprise, where his witnesses failed to appear for the hearing owing to non-service of summons, when such non-service is not due to the fault of the party, where a party is not ready owing to his lawyer having withdrawn his appearance in the case, under circumstances which do not give the party sufficient time to engage another lawyer and enable him to get ready, and where the refusal of an adjournment to a party will enable the opposite party to successfully evade a previous interim order against him. The reasons given for adjournment did not justify one. First, it is clear that the second respondent's lack of interest in the suit was a matter of surprise to the applicants when the suit came up for hearing on the material day. But from the correspondence, it is shown that the second respondent's position regarding the suit was known long before the hearing date, and therefore instructions should have been sought before the hearing date. Secondly, since the objective of the suit was to determine who the appellant's landlord was, and not to determine any proprietary interest by the appellant in the suit property, and as the second and third respondents disclaimed any interest over the suit property, and it was clearly evident to the appellants that only the first respondent had claimed such interest in the suit property, it is not true that an adjournment of the suit property of the suit to enable the appellant's counsel of instructions from them was sufficient cause. Thirdly, all the appellants were then sent from court when the suit was called for. Their absence without an explanation leaves the impression that their learned counsel went to court with the expectation of being granted an adjournment as a matter of course, and if that was so, it was too presumptuous on the part of those concerned, for which the appellants only have themselves to blame. The Court of Appeal in the Union Insurance Company of Kenya versus Ramzan Abdul Danji held, and I quote, "Whereas the right to be heard is a basic natural justice concept and ought not be taken away lightly, looking at the record before the court is not impressed by the point that the applicant was denied the right to defend itself. Clearly, the applicant was given a chance to be heard, and the court is not convinced that the issue of failure by the High Court to hear the applicant will be such an arguable point in the appeal. The law is not that a party must be heard in every litigation. The law is that parties must be given reasonable opportunity of being heard, and once that opportunity is given and is not utilized, on which the party not utilizing the opportunity can be heard, is why he did not utilize it," unquote. In this case, it is my view that the relevant statutory framework may be considered in deciding whether or not to grant an adjournment. In this case, it is true the committee had only 10 days within which to determine.
Justice George Odunga there delivering his ruling in a matter in which IEBC has submitted before the court that Wavinya Ndeti is guilty of party hopping and should not be allowed to run for election. Justice Odunga is delivering that ruling. Of course, we'll be bringing you updates from that particular event as we move on. Let's now link up with our reporter from Eldoret, John Wanyama, with regard to this issue about the health crisis. Nurses are on strike. This is the 16th day. How is the situation? First of all, good morning, John. How is the situation in Eldoret as far as that is concerned?
Good morning, Indimuli. And the situation here in Uasin Gishu County and the neighboring counties is that the situation is still worse, and it's getting worse each and every day. Now I'm at Uasin Gishu District Hospital, where we have been just trying to check what is happening here in this hospital. And in Indimuli, unlike Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, where over 1,000 nurses are on strike, here in this hospital, I'm seeing services a bit going on. I'm seeing women coming in with their children, trying to give them vaccines. Unlike MTRH, where totally nothing is happening and only doctors are focused on emergency services, here in Uasin Gishu District Hospital, services are going on, and as you can see behind me, mothers are coming in with their infants just to try and seek these vital services of vaccines to their kids. In Dimuli, it will be remembered that in Uasin Gishu, this nurses strike, it started early compared to any other regions in this country. Now it's 21 days compared to other nurses elsewhere in this country. There is no difference in Elgeyo Marakwet, Nandi, Trans Nzoia, mentioned them, entire North Rift. There is no any nurses who is working apart from this Uasin Gishu District Hospital that is functioning today. In Dimuli.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that update from Eldoret with regard to the nurses' strike. At least some form of movement and some form of activity at that particular hospital. But of course, John will keep updating us on the situation from there, as well as other correspondents across the country. They're all following up on that particular matter. Remember, the situation in Nairobi is probably worse, with a downing of tools by doctors as well. Doctors in Nairobi complain of salary arrears going back as far as December. Let's now come back to studio and continue with the conversations this morning. And of course, the biggest conversation has to do with this summons by IEBC to 14 different individuals who are suspected to have breached the code of conduct, the electoral code of conduct. As I mentioned earlier, we're in studio with Brian Weke, governance expert, Isaac Mora, nominated MP, and Mark Bichachi, political analyst. Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome.
Good morning.
Now, the main question, of course, everyone is asking is, of course, it's so easy to call people, name a few people and say they've breached this or the other law, but what next? Are you convinced that something will actually happen this time round? Let's start with you, Brian.
First, you know, in the history of this country, Fred, we actually have an Electoral Offences Act, which clearly brings out a number of electoral offences. And of course, you and I know that that list is not exhaustive. What would want IEBC to do, for the first time, to show us that it actually has teeth to bite. IEBC should come out strongly, and if somebody is to be found to be culpable, then they have to carry their cross. It does not matter whether you're ODM or NASA or Jubilee or any affiliate party. It is a high time in this country we tell people that we are tired with electoral offences.
Yes.
So really, all eyes on IEBC. We hope this is not a window dressing. You know very well that they had set up a multi-sectoral committee that had a number of members from different constitutional commissions, different institutions, and there was a similar list that was given to IEBC, and nothing happened.
Yes.
So we do hope, and I want to say it again, Chebukati talking tough and looking tough does not mean you're acting tough. We need to see Chebukati for the first time showing Kenyans that they have capacity to bite.
Okay, but Isaac Mora, don't you think this is just another classic case of window dressing, that nothing will come out of this, that no one will actually be barred from running for office come election day?
First and foremost, I think I want to say that it's a very strong action taken by the IEBC. We've not witnessed people being summoned in past elections, and it remains to be seen, because it's a question of what proceedings or what petitions, what pleadings are going to be made in these various issues, depending on who is opposing who and who was involved in what fracas. And I think it's something that needs to be commended, if nothing else, as a deterrent. And I think if it is found that actually somebody is responsible, then the best way is, of course, for proceedings to make sure that that person is not able to contest. But Fred, what I want to say is that there has been some witness we have been witnessing situations where you have a political rally, and then your opponent comes to just provoke you. It's not even an incident where maybe you found each other on the way to somewhere, but just somebody comes to your where you're having your activity just to disrupt. And I think there needs to be a lot of action taken in that regard. And
a case in point is when you got involved in one of those confrontations. Did you pursue that matter beyond that?
Yes, I did not pursue that matter, because I said after all was said and done, I forgave those people. And I think they have been very apologetic. Even on Sunday I met some of them. Because you don't need to do those things to you in an election. If you are with the people, then the people will vote for you.
But don't you think that that particular matter should have been pursued further, that anyone involved in electoral violence at any level should not be allowed to proceed with this race?
Fred, I'm a Christian. Because what I realize is that if I pursue the matter, the people would suffer, the hirelings, the boys who had been hired to do the same thing. So eventually you don't even reach to the perpetrator. So sometimes you also look at those issues that way. But then the full cause of the law needs to, when you are not a Christian and you need to pursue the law as is.
Mark Bichachi, karibu to the conversation. What do you have to say about this?
You know, I'm reminded of the theater we used to watch when we were kids. It was called Vioja Mahakamani, and there was a very popular statement towards the end of the show, and the judge would always say, iliwe funzo kwa wengine wenye tabia kama yako. And that's really what the IEBC needs to do for the sake of guys like Honorable Mwaura here, so that he can escape with his ear intact. It's very key that the IEBC takes this opportunity to make sure that it rains down hard on any form of election malpractice. It's the opportunity that it has to set precedents given the laws that have been passed. So it must take the opportunity to bite hard. Unfortunately, those when you want to set precedents and you want to set the bar, you only have one opportunity to make a first impression. So if this is their first impression, my advice to them would be hit hard, hit heavy, so that now everyone else who's campaigning will be alert. If they go soft on this issue, if they window dress this issue, then they will be they will lose the credibility and the energy that they would have if they go hard on this issue now.
Yes, but these are only 7 cases, and if I may just go through them quickly and mention probably some of the names. I do have the press release from the IEBC, which was actually documenting the names. Probably the most notable, Bungoma Governor Ken Lusaka versus his competitor Wycliffe Wangamati. Honorable Jessica Mbalu versus her competitor Philip Kaloki. That's in the race for the member of the National Assembly, Kibwezi East. Another one, Thomas Makori versus Steve Mbogo. That's concerning the Starehe constituency parliamentary seat. Eric Onyango versus Neto Adola, Rarieda constituency. Kavore Karaoke versus Nixon Korir. That has to do with the Langata constituency. That's member for the National Assembly. Benson Ongonge versus Frederick Onyangi Okeo. Kayole South Ward and Bakasi Central. Rachel Musyoki and Paris Ayuma versus Paris Ayuma. That's with regard to the seat of the Mountain View Ward, Westlands constituency. But these are only 7 different cases. Surely, coming from what we so famously refer to as bungled nominations and the violence that we saw, some was very public, and we saw it even on public TV. But only to come up with 7 different cases. Don't you think, Brian, that the list should have actually been much longer than this?
Now, you know, Fred, when you talk about so-and-so versus so-and-so, that's a clear indication that there is actually an actual petition that has been filed within the commission.
So the rest are like Bwana Isaac Mwaura's case,
Absolutely.
where he decided not to pursue the matter.
So the rest could be like Isaac Mwaura's case, where he nearly lost an year. I don't know whether he lost it and brought it back, but clearly, and let's be very honest, IEBC needs to deal with the cases that have been filed within IEBC, but in the same breath and light, they also have to act suo moto in cases where you actually see actual violence. You know, if you look at the nominations that were done, where you saw people were kidnapped, there was massive violence, regardless of whether it was ODM or Jubilee, that is a clear indication that as we move closer to the next election, you know, we are yet to deal with the perpetrators of 2007. And that is the reason why IEBC, and I want to urge the commission, should not only wait for cases to be filed within IEBC, but also should act suo moto, so that we actually make perpetrators of electoral violence to actually respond to these cases. Because if these things go unpunished, I need not to remind you, Fred, what will happen. As you can see, the temperatures are quite rising in this country. So if we do not deal with these cases as and when they arise, then I think we will deal with something much bigger, yes, towards the general election. But now,
Isaac Mwaura, you must agree with Brian that this should not be left to just the good nature of someone like you, that you may decide not to pursue a matter like that. If anyone has engaged in electoral violence, he he should be punished either way, whether you complain or not.
Well, I think if you look at the case of Margaret Wanjiru and the way she was arrested and she had to stay in custody, and the pronouncement of the judge then was that it was supposed to act as a deterrent. We didn't see a lot of prosecutions around the party primaries, and I think that's where the question starts in terms of electoral violence, because you see, you only become a candidate after you've been nominated by a particular political party, or if you are running as an independent. So there's a lacuna in law, and that's why I think we need to have a political parties primaries bill to address such gaps, because sometimes if you just rely on the idea that then you report an incident in the party primaries to the police alone and to the party structure, sometimes the party structures are so overwhelmed as to deal with the disputes that arise from the primaries or prior to the primaries. So you need a mechanism that links even party primaries to political parties disputes tribunal, and properly bring those matters before the court as to affect even the main election. You know, so those are some of the gaps that we need to look at. The other thing that I also want to say is that honestly, this from a personal experience, I think sometimes you need to move on. You need to forgive and let go, because
accept and move on.
Yeah, because sometimes when you keep it, you become bitter and vain, and then so you carry the baggage.
Survived that accept and move on mantra.
When you keep at it, then you are hurting inside. Like every time I touch my ear and I see the stitches and the ridges that have been left, of course I feel something. When I look at the bills that I had to go through, and it's not something nice, honestly. But then sometimes you need to move on, because politics, if you keep on putting things in your heart, because there was a time I was called for an interview, Fred, with another lady who also was affected by political violence. I think we need to have a mechanism where such issues are self-driven, even when you want some form of reparation. But it's good to accept and move on.
But someone who's affected or a victim of this electoral violence could keep quiet because of fear. Yet the case could actually be very public, that some of these cases documented on TV or in other media. Surely, do we still have to rely on the victim's complaint, formal complaint, for any of the bodies that are required to act to do so?
Fred, my worry about Honorable Maura's statement is, number one, that we must separate issues. We must separate the issue of personal decision and following due course of the law. Those two things are very separate. Forgiving someone does not necessarily mean that the law should not take place, because here are the stakes. There are very many women who are not running for office, because running for office in this country is a life and death question. Okay? You have to basically be willing to die to offer yourself to serve your nation. That's a ridiculous position to put any person who's offering themselves up for public service. It's sort of like saying to become a pastor I have to be shot in the head. It does not make sense at all. So what do we need to do as a nation? Number one, we need to stop idolizing political position to the extent that we will kill to get there, because we think the only way to be rich as a nation is to become a politician. That's one. The second thing, we need to come to the reality that this is a servanthood position. It is not a bosshood leadership motorcade position. That's the problem. That now when you idolize it so much, the life of an individual is so cheap that even you're willing to destroy entire families so that you can run for office. Those are the things that we need to address in the public psyche. And this thing of accepting and moving on is not even a Christian concept. It says if you have a sacrifice and you have an issue with your brother, it says go deal with it. It does not say accept and move on. So we need to stop lying to people. We must come back to the table and address issues.
And I think, Fred, just to pick from where Mark is saying, there's something that I need to tell Kenyans, and I think people need to understand. There is no money in politics, and people will not accept this. There is no money in politics, because our social system requires that if you are an elected public official, you are the one who doles out money, and you see, you cannot have limited resources.
That's actually one thing that we find very hard to swallow.
Exactly.
That there's no money in politics.
Yes, in terms of money that you can accumulate and make yourself rich, but unless you are actually corrupt, because the demands from the public outweigh the sources of your income. And that is why you find most members of parliament, after they have served, they end up being poor. So if you want to get into public service, you've got to have the desire to actually serve the public. Because this is one of the jobs, I can say, having been there now for more than 4 years, that there is no pretense about it. It's about how you serve the people, the demands that come to you as an individual, and how you deal with them. In fact, when people elect you, or when you're in a position of political leadership, you become the government. And I think, Fred, we have discussed with you before about the various, the dichotomy between the aspirations of the Constitution and the real practice of politics. However, having said that, I think I want to differ with my brother Mark here, because when we talk about historical injustices, when we talk about healing the nation, even when political violence has happened, because when you don't do so, you may not be able even to contest in future. You will have already succumbed to the wishes of your perpetrator. You've got to rise up and move on.
But I think what Mark is saying, that is a personal decision, that the law should be beyond a personal choice to actually forgive your assailant.
Fred, laws do not, I don't want to be a preacher man, but if even you look at the Bible, the law never solved anything. In fact, it created more atrocities. In fact, sin, the word sin in the Bible is as a result of those transgressions around what is codified in statutes. So I think the issue is we also need to have a mechanism, I think, over and above following legal procedures, and I am still the one who says that we need a law for political preference, also to arbitrate. And I think IEBC also should be doing that as well, to arbitrate any political conflict other than just following through the law, so that Brian Weke can make some money as a lawyer.
Fred, when I listen to Mwaura, sometimes I wonder, when Mwaura sits on national TV and they say there is no money in politics. I have known Mwaura for a number of years, and when he was nominated to parliament, a lot changed. Kenyans are one of the best paid parliamentarians in the world. One of the best paid. Whatever you choose to do with your money, that is your own funeral. Are we together? So Mwaura cannot say that you're paying me well, but I have a lot of responsibilities. Before he went to parliament, he did not have responsibilities. However, I want to address myself to key issues. Now, this theory of accept and move on, Fred, is going to disintegrate this country further. You remember the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission report?
Yes.
Nothing has happened. And it was a theory. It was a system where we said, anybody who has offended anybody, you need to come out and say, I did this, I accept, I do apologize. That has never happened. We are told, accept and move on. Issues of Ndungu land report, historical injustices as regards land. Every election, it is a discussion. Now you have seen, again, it has been revived. It is an issue. Issues of land are quite emotive. Again, that was never dealt with. Accept and move on. Issues of having proper electoral processes and free and fair elections, and the outcome of elections, you're told, accept and move on. Issues of ICC, issues of electoral violence, people who banned people, we are told, no, now we are working together, accept and move on. It is a very dangerous
Brian,
theory.
do you think, back to this discussion about what's happening today with the summons, because yes, in some of the cases, and of course the IEBC has not really documented or rather given any evidence, or rather even gone ahead to describe what kind of cases they're dealing with, but in some of these instances we are aware violence was involved. In the case of Governor Ken Lusaka and Wycliffe Wangamati, we do understand that at one point both their supporters clashed, and that resulted in the death of one person. Whether or not that's why they've been summoned by IEBC, we still do not know, but yes, that could be one of it. It is a matter of life and death. Yes, as you say, accept and move on doesn't count, but do you think IEBC is even able to handle this matter?
And that's the reason why, Fred, I am saying this theory of accept and move on is not building us. It is actually destroying us. That is the reason why we have a law. And you see, in law we have both retributive and restorative justice. And even as you choose to restore, retributive aspect has to work. So that's why I am appealing to IEBC that it is a time in this country that retributive justice needed to work. And not only IEBC. I want to appeal to all the institutions. Now, many people have died. Even now, because Mwaura chooses to be a Christian, you saw the violence that happened in his constituency. Guess what? They were running against a woman who was incumbent. Now, if that happened to Mwaura, what happened to Esther Gadogo, who was actually a woman? Look at in Madare constituency. People died. People need not... Look at where I come from in Mbita. Millie's security was killed. Nothing has ever happened. Millie's house was torched. Nothing has ever happened. The motor vehicles were literally broken down. Nothing has ever happened. So again, the issues of accept and move on. While it looks like it is a quick fix thing, it does not really help us. And that is the reason why the commission this time round, can they show us that they have teeth as provided?
Big question. Do you think IEBC actually has teeth?
Fred,
let me able to handle this.
Let me answer that one.
Mwaura. Let's start with you, Bwana Mwaura.
Let me first. I'm very, very curious to hear my brother Brian Weke, a social justice advocate, telling Kenyans on national television that there needs to be some element of retribution in terms of acquiring our national, justice. I think that is really wrong, and that is where you get people being told to be evicted from lands that they bought, willing buyer, willing seller in Kajiado, in Laikipia and other places. It goes against, the spirit of national cohesion. And I think when you talk about cohesion, even when you look at the Gasasa courts, if you look at the South African case, anywhere where there has been truth, justice, and the word is reconciliation. You see, you've got to have for you to get restorative justice, which is what I'm advocating for, you've got to avoid retribution, because when you do some retribution, then you perpetuate the bitterness and the antagonism.
But there should be some level of punishment in some of these cases.
I think when people own up, and accept that they have done mistakes, and that is what I would want to ask IEBC to do, it better be left at that. And also, just to bring an aspect that Fred maybe we may want to point out, about Ayub Sabula's, bodyguard, who was actually stabbed 8 times and he has since died. Our Kenyan elections, fundamentally, are actually more violent, even in comparison with other elections around East Africa. So whatever that we need to do to stop this, it has to be done. But I do not agree. It has to be retributed.
But Mwaura, you say all that Sela needs to do is go and own up and say, yes, I'm responsible for this and I'm sorry, so we move on.
That is not as simple as that. I think you need to do a little bit more. You need to restore the justice.
Should there be punishment in the cases of these 7 cases? Should there be some form of punishment for anyone found culpable?
The only problem with that, before Mark comes in, is sometimes it is used for political reasons. Let me give you an example so that you understand why I'm saying that. The moment I was attacked in Ruiru, I reported to the party. I even recorded a statement at the Kimbo police station. And then there were discussions at the party headquarters to actually bar the candidate from contesting. Now, I must disclose this. Now, we were 3 candidates. And by the way, to correct Brian, who said that some of the women are the most violent, by the way. So let us not genderize this issue. And then I looked at it. We were 3 candidates. If this candidate in question was to be barred from contesting, his supporters would have voted for my opponent. So either way I would have lost. Those are the scenarios that you need to consider when you think about restorative justice.
I think, Honorable Mwaura, you're confusing issues. Number one, justice is not about who wins the poll after you step down. This is what justice is. Do you remember this short guy who climbed a tree to see Jesus? Okay? When Jesus went to his house, the only way there was reconciliation between this guy and society was when he decided to restore to everyone he'd ever stolen from. That is what justice is. Reconciliation is not sweeping things under the rug. Let us be very, very clear. Even Jesus himself, for him to forgive you, you must confess. You understand? There must be a responsibility taken by a particular party. The problem with us as a nation is we keep thinking that, listen, if the person who's been victimized is supposed to forgive, what is the other person supposed to do? repeat the same offense, and that is what has been happening since 1992, because we have a history as human beings to repeat history. Okay? If we do not take a proper stand and say, here and now, as a society, we are going to hold accountable the people who are perpetrating violence in this nation, then what's going to happen is there's someone today, I promise you, in this nation, who is sitting down and saying, in 2007, I did X, Y, Z, I got away scot-free. I will do it again. So it is not enough to say you've forgiven. You see, you can forgive your thief, but if you don't change your burglar-proof doors and put security around your house, he will come again. Yes. So we need to understand that there's a side of this reconciliation which requires that we uproot from our society the elements of evil who have perpetrated violence against our own people. Wow. It has to happen.
On that note, we want to take a break. When we return, we'll be asking this question: does IEBC have the proper laws in place to ensure that they can punish anyone? And if so, what kind of punishment should we expect for any of these 14 individuals who've been summoned? If they're found culpable, what is the worst that could happen to them? If at all we're not just talking things that head nowhere. That, when Citizen Extra returns.